Hey guys, starting another project. Hey, yeah, it's another Predicta TV, but hey, you know what? There aren't that many left. This is part of that New York shipment from last fall, and they're all going to be done and out of here by early September, and then I just have one or two more, so we have maybe 8 total left to do. And then I don't expect to work on another predictor for a few years, so enjoy it while you can. Now, this was going to be a little different, I think, because did initial triage and the picture tube is dead. And it's a little rough. Well, the cabinet looks okay. I shouldn't say it's rough. I don't really know what the condition is inside, or I don't recall. But we're just going to completely tear this thing down. And picture tube, 21-inch picture tubes for Predictas are virtually unobtainable right now, even if money was no object. 21 FDP4 is the recommended replacement from back when they initially had the short lifespan was discovered around 1960 or so. They came out with the FDP4, and that was the manufacturer's recommended replacement. Those are really hard to get at, really hard to find. But luckily, 110-degree deflection angle 21-inch picture tubes were used for a number of years and a lot of sets. That became the standard in around 59, 60, and all the manufacturers started using 21-inch, 110-degree deflection angle CRTs. The main issue being the neck length. The original Predicta had a really short neck, and others had longer necks. And there was somewhat different basing and slightly different parameters. But generally, if you're creative, you can get just about any of them to work. So, when I went to the early television convention last month, my object was to find a couple 21-inch Predicta compatible picture tubes for this guy's collection, because this one is completely dead, the other one is very weak, and I really wanted to replace them for him before I shipped them back to New York. I didn't find any drop-in replacements. I didn't find any with exactly the same basing, but I did find some that I think I can make work. And it was curious that, going by the actual published specs for these picture tubes, the necks are much longer. They stick out like 1.5 inches in the back, and they have a different base on them. The museum had a number of them in stock, and it turns out that most, if not all, of the ones they have are rebuilds. And turns out when they rebuild picture tubes, they're a little loose with the specs. So I picked up 3 of them, and the length of the necks varies considerably by about 2 inches between the shortest and the longest. It turns out the shortest of them will fit inside one of these with the back cover on. It's a good 1.5 inches shorter, or less deep, than the published specs for that picture tube type. So it makes you really wonder if it was for a set that was designed for the longer one. Maybe you had a special a yoke with a lot of length to it. Probably wouldn't even fit or wouldn't work right. But hey, I'm not going to complain. Now one of the others I got is long, and it would definitely require some modifications. What am I talking about? So most 21-inch CRTs that electrically will work, physically will fit inside of this. The necks are longer, and they'll stick out the back. So you can leave the back off, you can add spacers to it, you can cut a hole in the middle, do something as it's going to protrude. But anyways, I dug up one that I think will work with this, but I'll have to put a different socket on it and rewire it. But it should bring this back to life, and it's a rebuild, so it should be super bright and have a lot of life left. Otherwise, the screen cover on this looks to be in pretty darn good shape. It has shrunk. They're all shrinking now. It's just the way it goes. There's some tape I need to clean off of this, but thank God it doesn't have a thick layer of crud I have to deal with, so that's one good thing. But I do not relish taking this apart, because when they shrink, that can be pretty hard to get back together. So that's one of our challenges, is to you get a working picture tube in this. The other, well, let's take a look at the chassis. You know, the more I look at this, it's actually pretty nice. There's a ding here, but the fake photo finish is in really good shape. So this is real wood, this is fake wood grain. Sometimes it's all flaking or chipping off. Not bad. And all the knobs are here, which is a huge plus. Missing the antenna, and even the stump of it is gone. We just have a hole on the side. That's a little annoying. Legs look to be in decent shape, and the feet aren't all worn down, which can happen. They have little hard rubber feet at the end of these brass plated legs. Original back is here. This has been cut off. People ask, what is this little chain for? I can't confirm this, but I believe it was there so that when you would take the back off for servicing, you just flip it up and then you wouldn't lose the back to the set, as so often happens. Quality. There we go. Oh boy, that looks, from what I can see, that looks super clean. It's all nice and shiny on the cadmium plating. So let's see. Not a big fan of the 21-inch in general because they're transformerless, series strong, with kind of an odd design, really awkward to work on. You get a mixture of a lot of point-to-point wiring and a circuit board, a couple circuit boards to work on. But at least one good thing, it's easy to get the chassis out because there's just two screws holding it in. You pull out the knobs and pull the thing out. So I said there was another challenge. You had a challenge as well, of course, to get the chassis working. Now they claim these were easy to service because they used enough lead length going to the CRT and the speaker you can pull the chassis out. Yeah, that's true to some extent. Get the side knobs off. But to really work on it, you have to disconnect everything and really pull it out. But at least we can get a good look at it. Man, I always get hung up. There's not a lot of clearance from the top of this to the bottom of that. I like what I'm seeing, which is no rust, and just a faint patina of dust and minimal work on it. I'm always curious when I see these and they've had a little bit of work done is to see what parts failed. And often it's kind of surprising to me what they ended up needing to replace to get it working. So on this main board here, of all the weird things that they might have had to work on, they did some kind of crazy work on this socket. So these are the sets, more than the 17s, that these 21s tend to have socket failure. So it looks like, because they didn't want to take the board out, they shoved a new 7-pin socket into the old 7-pin socket and somehow attached them together. Okay, I'll have to check that out when we pull the board. And a resistor. And it looks like they lifted up the leg on several of these caps, but then just put them back down. These are originals, and they're still in here. So maybe they were troubleshooting. Or did they pull the board? Because I'm seeing on this side, a lot of these wires have been taken off and rather crudely, very crudely reattached. Looks like about half of them. So it is possible to not take all the wires off and bend the board up. I think that's what they did. And it looks like, for example, this was reworked. This coil's seen better days too. Looks kind of melted and bent over. Oh wow, and this one got totally I think somebody was very sloppy with their soldering. Maybe used a gun even, and they just melted the crap out of some of this stuff while they were going in to reconnect things. They replaced the wire going to the horizontal output tube plate cap. Okay, they cut the high voltage wire for some reason. Of all the wires to cut, oh, I know why. Because they didn't want to deal with it prior, they didn't know how. It's not that hard to get out. So I'm going to probably just end up replacing that entire wire. You've got 16,000 volts on this. Electrical tape's not going to cut it in terms of insulation. So you just pop the top off this board and you pull it out. No, it's not the easiest thing to do, but it's not that difficult. High voltage wire comes through a hole in the side of the box and goes down into a little hole down there. Easier to get it out if you take out the high voltage rectifier. Be very careful so you don't break off the lead going to the cap on the top of that. Get out of the way. And then just yank it out. I need to cut it. There we go. Okay, so that's that. And now the other is just unplug. That's it. Now the whole chassis can come out of the cabinet. Ruh-roh. Looks like we had some critters living in here. See some dead ladybugs, some... Oh, I thought those were hulls from seeds. I didn't think those are all dead ladybug carcasses. Okay, that's not so bad. We got dead fly. We have the cardboard tube that would normally go over the pile light on the tuner. I thought it was seeds, which could indicate rodent activity, but I think we're good there. We got a lot of fluff we can clean off. Looks like no corrosion. And now we can take a look underneath. Again, kind of curious to see what they had to replace. So they replaced the thermistor. That's a high failure rate part. Still has the original filament dropper resistor. And looks like well, they replaced one cap. That maroon guy there is new. And they replaced one electrolytic. Looks like that's it. We can find a date code on some of these parts. Maybe we can guesstimate when this work was done. I'm thinking a very long time ago. Like in the 60s maybe. And for some reason the thermistor, not thermistor, the fusible resistor, it's gone and it is just corroded badly. It's like copper sulfate, so bright blue. And I don't see any traces of... Oh, wait, yes I do. This is what's left of the fusible resistor. He thinks it exploded, ruptured. This would be the outer casing to it. I don't know where the actual wire bits went. Got a lot of work done over the weekend. I completely rebuilt this board, replaced all the sockets, all the caps except for the ceramic and the one mica, and new cup plates. I checked all the coils for continuity and they seemed to be okay. They're in the right range as indicated on the service info. So melted though they may be, let's hope they're still okay. Board's in good shape. Apparently a trace was damaged at some point in the back and repaired. Or past, I should say. I didn't do that repair, somebody else did. Oh, and there was one stake broken off, one of the grounding stakes, this guy. And I just replaced it from a parts board. Now when this board had been pried up, or whatever had been done to it, all the wires along this side and this back edge were cut short. and just a little stub remaining, and those were tacked on to the post rather than wrapped around. I'll try to do it more securely. If there isn't enough lead length on the wire to cut insulation back, I may just replace some of the wires. I then went ahead and rebuilt the entire main chassis. The only thing of note is that there was one resistor that was open. This guy, R7, which feeds or drops down the main B plus to 140 volts, which feeds the IF. So with that resistor being open, the set could not have worked. I'm curious as to why this, what was the final blow to this set. Picture tube appears to be dead, but that resistor also would have killed the set, and the fusible resistor was blown open. So, which of those in what order failed? I don't know. Sure, somebody could have been fiddling around with the set with that resistor being dead, and at some point that popped. That could have popped and that resistor was still fine, and over time it failed just from oxidation or something like that. It was a carbon comp, which don't typically just go to infinity. Wire wound can because they oxidize. Well, I don't know. And then, of course, there's the picture tube. I'll have to recheck it. I don't recall if the filament was open or if it just has zero emissions. At any rate, I will get this reinstalled, and then I'm going to hook this up to my test jig, and we'll try to get this working, and then we'll tackle the picture tube. Well, I'll just jump right to the point. After wiring in the board, populating the tubes, fired up the set, it worked. Some of these controls are kind of mangled. The vertical linearity control that's so oftenly bad in both the 17 and 21 inch sets has been replaced with something that's awkward to adjust. So vertical linearity is off a little bit. But the big problem that remains is the tuner. It's dead. I tried swapping out tubes so far. It's the only thing I've done. I put in one from another set right now that I knew was good. So that's the second set now. In fact, I think the same owner, both of his Holiday sets, the tuners were dead. The blonde Holiday I gave up on. I ended up swapping it out with a spare I had, but I got to get this one working. I don't have any more spares left. So, yeah, I'll have to dig into it. It's just nothing. If I pull the connector out of it, I get a little bit of some indication of a signal coming into the IF board, but really it's just not doing anything. Well, now, I think I may have found a problem. Can you spot it? Yeah, that doesn't look right. I think this might have gotten hit by lightning. Oof, that's even worse than I realized at first. Man, something bad happened. So I noticed this capacitor was blown apart. There we go. But this coil next to it, this adjustment up top, this whole structure here looks pretty charred as well. And the cap on this side looks like it's got a little issue too. The connector looks okay though. Now this is a hot chassis set. Sort of. So some of the mounting structure is isolated from the main chassis. This is hot. This is not. There are plastic blocks between the two. This would be mounted to this, and this goes to the hot. Yes, so this whole metal structure here would be hot. So, could it have been line voltage that arced through it somehow? Like if this was hot and this was connected to ground? Maybe that blew it apart. Because if it was lightning, say lightning hit the antenna, I would have expected to see some other issues somewhere where the antenna terminals connect or through these wires or some other place. It wouldn't just be right here. Normally, I think that just... Actually, I'm not even sure that that's... I'm going to check what those are. Those could be resistors, but no, I think they're caps. Looks like... Yeah, the twin lead just comes into these two caps, and these caps couple the signal to the coil. I'll pull out the schematic and check on that. Also, some other components coming up here. But nothing else looks particularly damaged, just that. So anyways, normally, there'd be talking microvolts, millivolts, nothing that could ever do damage like that. Well, it wasn't much fun, and it took a lot longer than I would have liked, but I did get the tuner working, and all cleaned up. So, the component that blew apart is one of these red guys. That is an antenna chassis isolation network. One of these guys. 470 microfarad capacitor in parallel with a resistor, which is oddly spec'd out at 0.2-1 meg. That means the value can vary between 200K and 1 meg, which is a huge range. So what are they there for? Well, remember, this is a hot chassis set. On the left here, that diagram, that's the screw terminals for the antenna. And if we follow it over, it goes through a transformer to ground. That ground could be one side of the AC line, or it is one side of the AC line. I mean, it could be the hot side of the AC line. And if those components weren't there and it was just a straight line to the screw terminals, you could have a full line voltage on one of the screw terminals, both of the screw terminals, which was a huge shock hazard. So those are there to prevent shock by using a high value resistor, but then the capacitor is there to let the RF get through. So one of them blew apart. Why? Possibly lightning strike. Possibly that resistor started failing and whatever this was connected to was grounded and one side of the AC line burned its way through. I don't know. The only reason I'm a little... Well, I don't really have any experience with lightning strike. I have one radio that I suspected, and it's just, there's all sorts of coils blew open in it. That was the only damaged component. I thought maybe the wires would have been charred or something else would have been damaged. Anyways, so I wanted to see if I could resurrect this. So that's not a standard off-the-shelf component. They aren't made anymore. Somebody was selling a few new old stock ones a few months back on eBay, but they're not listed anymore. So I thought I'd make my own flavor of it. So I took a 560 picofarad 6 kilovolt cap. I wanted to use a one that could withstand high voltage, and I paralleled it with a 680K resistor. I just sort of picked one in the middle of that resistance range. That would probably work, and it did work for a moment. But when I was going to, after I did some tests, I was going to mount this more securely, my needle nose pliers slipped, and I broke the coil, broke the transformer. This is by being tired and being clumsy, and that is a very, very difficult component to replace, even if I had a spare. So, I called it quits for the night, and the next day I dug through my junk box, and I found this guy, which is a very, very similar tuner, but this came from a set that I bought the chassis from somebody who parted the set out to repurpose it. This is a UHF version. That's why it has this extra RCA connector sticking out of the top here, and it has some different structures inside, a whole different switchback plate that would enable the UHF and disable the VHF tuner at a certain point on the rotation. Anyways, the back plate was virtually identical. And it's not that hard to get out. You clip out a couple caps, take 3 screws out, take a snap ring out, and the whole thing just comes out. So I removed this guy, I removed it from that guy, and transplanted it onto this guy. and it's working. So, hooray. I really wanted to say this tuner because it cleaned up really well, and it's in very, very nice shape, good switch action, other than whatever blew out that component. It's in really good condition. So, now we can proceed. I'll do a little more cleaning, we'll clean up the controls, and then start putting this back together. Taking a look at this, I noticed that this control has been completely replaced. That's the brightness and vertical linearity. That vertical linearity control is a common failure point. So that's why it looks different than the others. But it works, so fine. And the same with the power switch. So instead of being push on, push off, it's now pull on, push off. And they got a little creative with the mounting there, so basically soldered it on. But again, it works, and it's there, so it's going to leave it alone. So I'm going to undo my alligator clips now that I know this works, and mount it back, and remount this securely, and I'll leave it playing for a while, make sure everything is up to snuff, and then we're going to tackle replacing the bad picture tube. Well, in this box is a 21 CQ P4 that I picked up at the TV convention last month. Notice the base. It kind of looks like an octal tube base, except the keyway is a little bit fatter. This is that intermediate base type. Luckily, the neck is the same diameter, an inch and 1/8, I do believe. And this is the same as the 8YP4 test CRT. And I've put some Predicta yokes onto that little test CRT. Sometimes you can get hung up on this Bakelite base. The later tubes, they just dispense with this base altogether, and the pins just come right through the glass, just like a miniature tube. So this doesn't even exist in later generations. Now, if you go by the specs, this picture tube should not fit inside the housing. However, this is a rebuild. I bought several rebuilds, and when they rebuild it, they cut the glass here, and they insert a new electron gun, glass stem, base, they evacuate it and reseal it, and all that. The length on the rebuilds can vary quite a bit. Between the three I bought, one is about what it should be, according to the specs. One is a little bit longer, and this one is considerably shorter. Between the three, the length of the neck varies by almost 2 inches, which is crazy. But this one, I eyeballed it that a test fit with the back cover. It should just fit. However, I need to make an adapter or rewire it or something because my socket's not going to fit onto this base. Now, because it's used for a short period of time, this base can be kind of hard to find. I don't know if I have any. I need to dig around. I think I might have an adapter for use with the 8YP4 test CRT, which also has this base on it. But as far as a permanent solution, I'm not sure what I'm going to do right now. But I think with the help of an adapter, at least I can install this and we can power it up and check out how it looks. It should be considerably brighter. Yes, it does. A little smaller, actually. I had to tighten the screws down a couple turns tighter than they had been before. But otherwise, no problem. The yoke slipped right down. Again, actually a little bit smaller than the old one. I had to tighten the screw. I was getting a little bit worried I had to put some kind of shim in there or something, but no, that's on there solid. So now, obviously, here's the problem. I can't plug that into that. I do have some adapters, though, from CRT testers. Either one of these will go from the bigger type to this type. I need to pull up the wires a little bit to give myself some more lead to play with to get up and over that. I'm going to double check the pinout though before I apply power to this. Oh, interesting. So, yeah, the key is way over there. So the key on this CRT is here. but on the adapter it's way over here. So you remember what I said about the filament typically being on our side of the keyway. With the adapter it is, so the filament comes in here, and then down below it's going to the pins 3 and 4. So that pretty well confirms that this adapter is doing the right thing it needs to do. But if I was to use this adapter, it would never fit inside there because it would add that much to it. So what I need to do is find a socket like this, a really low profile, and I'm going to have to cut this one out and splice in the other and mount it down. I took a brief look on eBay. I didn't find any. One of the challenges is to find out what is it called. There are, if you look up in tube data books, there are names for these. There will be a series of letters and numbers. So I need to figure that out and then search around. Because these were only used for a short period, and of course we're talking 60 years ago. I might have a little bit of, more than 60 years ago, 65 years ago. I might have a little bit of trouble finding one. Cleaned up the housing, reassembled it, cleaned up the cabinet, went over with some Oz polish, populated the chassis with new old stock tubes, slid everything together, and I just spent a good frustrating hour tweaking the picture to get about the best linearity I've ever seen on a Predicta. It's frustrating. Vertical generally isn't too bad because at least you have a height and a linearity control. The horizontal, there's no linearity control. You have a width control, and you can swap the horizontal output tube and the damper tube to have some effect on it. But what really comes into play is that guy, T-bar magnet. If you push it in or pull it out, it either gives a little magnetic assist or retards it a little bit on this side of the screen. You can also twist it a little to control keystoning in this corner. So, got that squared away. Finally, and for centering, this is the type where you have these two guys, these little magnets. You rotate them. You don't rotate them by grabbing that center thing and twisting it. You actually twist the outer bits. Yeah, it's safe to get your fingers in here. There aren't any high voltages, so just try to stay away from that. So I still have my adapter on here, which sticks out. I think I found a brightener online that I can buy and cannibalize to get the proper base, and then I'll wire it into this. So that might take a week or two to secure. Brass end caps, I got those from TV Restorer guy. He's a guy online who makes those very nice Predicta couplates and decals. Highly recommended. I think $12 for a pair. They're solid brass. You can polish them to your heart's content. Alright, so we are just about done with this, and this is one of the nicest holidays I've ever had the pleasure of working on. One last, here we go. Luckily I had a spare base out of I don't know what. That's what actually mounts in these two holes with a couple screws like that. And then I scavenged a telescoping antenna out of an old pair of rabbit ears. So I need to trim down that plastic a little bit, and then we'll get that all mounted in there. He does have the original back, the original power cords in pretty good shape, so we're very close to wrapping this project up. Boy, it's nice to see a new old stock picture tube. I ended up scavenging a new CRT socket from a brightener. This base is sometimes known as a Sylvania 110 degree base. A little trickier to find, certainly less common than the original type base that was in here, but I did find one, and it does just fit. So I can put the cover back on the rear, and here it is playing. One of the nicest holidays I've ever had the pleasure of working on, including the cabinet. The original faux finish is in about as good a condition as you're ever going to find one. This tends to flake off over time, but this one is quite nice. So that is going to wrap up this project. Only a few more Predictas to go, and then they're all going away. Thanks for watching.